Hello students, in this video we are going to do the impact of Renaissance in different fields of society. So here first we'll begin with the impact of Renaissance in the field of art. Now here when we talk about Renaissance, you know it is revival, rebirth, a modern way of thinking, as well as it has its main feature as humanism, or the study of human being, man, as the central part of the entire exploring the human body, human features, human feelings. So here when we talk about art, the Renaissance did not merely lead to the rebirth of learning but also to the rebirth of art. During the medieval times, the painting and sculptures were totally a tool of propagating religion. That means they emphasized on religion, religious aspects. But now, as human being became the important topic of study and important topic to show all your representations in ways of art and painting and sculpture and everywhere. So even the modern painters stopped using the same old techniques. Even they had restricted ways of portraying people and the color use. Everything was now, you can say people, those who are of the modern thinking of the Renaissance period, they started breaking out the rules and the traditional things, and they started taking modern ways. They adopted new artistic methods such as frescoes for the wall paintings, and then oil, you can say oil colors and wood cutouts, they were also included and they were used. These studies, they studied optics and even anatomy also to understand better way of presenting the drawings, whatever they had to paint, and the proportions, the perspectives of all these paintings. Everything had to be done properly, and for that they had proper study, the modern way and the new look, new way of looking at the things, how they should be represented. All that was decided by the modern artists of Renaissance period. Painting also changed during, remember when we are talking about painting and drawing, art is basically drawing the sculptures, painting is basically more of the coloring part. So here we can say there were many artists, and along with that the famous painters who painted not only the paintings but various other, you can say, wall paintings, frescoes, ceilings, everything they are included in here. Among the Renaissance period, the painting was very high standards set up, and they were able to show their talent without being restricted on the rigid rules of the church, because as we know the church ruled and they you can say governed the society. So during this time they started breaking the rules and using the modern ways or different, you can say whatever they had their particular queries, the spirit of inquiry, they started using it, and with that particular thing they started using their way of representing a thing, and that was against or even breaking out the rules of the church, that what should be done, what should not be done, and what if it has to be done, in what way it has to be done. Everything was decided by the church, and they started breaking opening the rules and regulations and the restrictions as well. Here we say they had a humanistic secular approach and produced highly artistic and lifelike paintings, because obviously they had studied dimensions and anatomy, perspectives, and every way of representing the art feature, and that is why it was a high standard of painting, and an artistic view of whatever the thing was drawn was very, very real-like. Some of the important painters were obviously Leonardo da Vinci. He was one of those people who was not only a very good artist, but he was a learned man. We can say that he was he had mastery over many things. He was a great painter, sculptor, musician, scientist, and he usually used to love reading. He has written a lot of things of knowledge obviously, and all the things that you read and go through the works of Leonardo da Vinci, you get to learn so many different things. So that is why we can say Leonardo da Vinci was one of those most important people of the Renaissance period, who brought new or modern way of thinking, not only in art but also in painting, also in sculpting, science, music, literature. Every way he is considered to be one of the important people of this particular era, who was, you can say, master. He was not jack of all, he was rather the master of all the various things where he had done some or the other contribution. He has, you can say, proper knowledge of those particular fields. Another important painter of this era was Michelangelo. Michelangelo was also, you can say, a painter, sculptor, architect, and a poet. He concentrated on painting the human figures, and that is what he did in his famous painting, that is in the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, is Last Judgment. You must have seen a particular portrait where two people are having their hands touched in such a way that fingers are about to touch each other. That is basically the Last Judgment, the fall of man. All those paintings are some of the finest piece of work that we have seen by Michelangelo. Besides that, Raphael is also one of the important artists of this time. He has studied from the Florentine school, and his celebrated painting was Sistine Madonna. Madonna is another name for the Virgin Mother Mary. And then he lived several years in Rome in the service of Pope, and he decorated the entire Vatican and designing the St. Peter's Church over there. So he was, you can say, the one person who has decorated everything, all the important things in the Vatican through his own paintings. Then next particular field that we talk about which had the profound impact of Renaissance was sculpture. Now as we see, on paper we are able to represent our thoughts and our perspectives through the paintings and drawing, but when the same thing is given a lifelike feature, that turns out to be sculpting. So most of the sculpting also during the Renaissance period was based on the human figures and proper representation of all the dimensions, all the features, all the expressions on those statues, so that they turn out to be lifelike. Some of the outstanding sculptors of this particular era were Donatello. They all used many of the Greek and Roman masterpieces, and some of them even made their own masterpieces. Donatello was one who made the bronze statue of David, and he was shown as triumphant over Goliath. Now David and Goliath is one of the story which is taken from the Bible itself. David, a young boy, slaying a giant called Goliath. Then next is the famous sculptor in Italy was Lorenzo Ghiberti. He was the one who worked for 20 years just on 2 pairs of bronze doors which were on the baptistry of Florence. So he kept on working on them, sculpting them, and there it is not just any ordinary doors. They are basically huge doors with all the carving and sculpting done on them. Next is Michelangelo, as we have done about him as a painter also. So he was an architect and he was a sculptor also. He has done Pieta. Pieta is basically one of his famous statues in which Mother Mary is shown holding in her arms the dead body of the Jesus Christ when he was crucified. After that, when he was brought down from the cross, so that body of Jesus is shown in her laps, on her lap, and she's holding that body. So that is one of the most important statue that has been shown over there. He has also made a huge statue of David in Florence and statue of Moses. They are all made by Michelangelo. So in Italy, many sculptors worked for the popes or even for the rich merchants also, and they decorated churches, palaces, and even some of them did various other sculptures on the freelancing. So we can say later on the sculptors were invited to England, France and Spain, and that is how this Renaissance spread from these areas, from the main areas Italy, to the other parts of Europe, and then from Europe to other parts of the other continents as well. So that is how this is sculpting, and you can say more fame they got in the sculpting, the more spread Renaissance got through their work and the way they have represented the human figure and the human stories related to the human feelings, human figures, and all those things depicted through those statues and paintings. Next we see the most important part is literature. How did Renaissance impact literature? The most significant impact of Renaissance literature was the use of local languages. Till now, even in India, we have seen most of the religion like Jainism, Buddhism, we see they became very famous. Why? Because people were given teachings in their simple common language, not in the very refined Sanskrit or any particular language which was very important and only the skilled people could read it. So over here also the English, instead of using Latin, they started using the simplest languages, which were those languages which were commonly spoken by the people. And earlier writers dwelt in spiritual themes, including heaven and all those things, heavenly things. But now, however, during Renaissance, it was obviously humanism was followed, so it gave birth to different new style of writing. New movement came about, and that was talking and expressing the human feelings, like the romantic novels or the stories, the biographies, or writing about biblical stories. So all where human figure is basically, and their happiness, sadness, sorrow, comfort, discomfort, their stories were represented. Those particular things were written in the literature. They became more, you can say, sorted out. And literature in Italy was Machiavelli was a great political writer of Italy, and he expressed his political ideas through his works. The Prince, that is one of the important work that Machiavelli has done, and Dante's Divine Comedy is an epic poem also. Besides that, it reveals the religious and social life of that particular era. Along with that, Petrarch, a great scholar and writer, has been called the father of humanism. So it might be a short question might be asked to you, who was called as the father of humanism? You should remember it is Petrarch. Petrarch. Petrarch was called as was a great scholar and writer, and he was called the father of humanism. His sonnets, lyrics are all popular throughout Europe. Other Italian writers were Ariosto, Tasso, Boccaccio, and Boccaccio also wrote many of the prose. They are like the paragraphs, so they wrote that. And besides that, this is all we are talking about your Italian or Italy, in the literature in Italy. But talking about English, we can say that in English it was number of writers, those who were the poets and dramatists. They also became quite profoundly famous, and they got a lot of they became quite renowned here. Geoffrey Chaucer, and he was heralded in the Renaissance literature in England. He is regarded as father of the English poetry. So be very careful about these terms. Who is called as the father or father of humanism? It is Petrarch. Who is called as the father of English poetry? You should know it is Geoffrey Chaucer, who's called this way. Who's given this title. And what is his famous work? So you can always mention that one given in your book, that is the Canterbury Tales. In his Thomas More is there, and he wrote Utopia, describing an imaginary island in America where the rich did not exploit the poor. So that is Utopian, the perfect world, utopian world. He has written about that, and that is Utopia he has written. So there are many other writers, among them the important writers whom you might be knowing also, and you can always mention. You will always get marks for them. They are William Shakespeare, obviously, Francis Bacon, Ben Jonson, Marlowe, and Francis Bacon is one of the famous prose writers also. And obviously you can never skip Shakespeare when it comes to Renaissance, because he is of the same era. And Ben Jonson, and the most important work during this era was The Paradise Lost, which was written by John Milton. And besides that, Edmund Spenser wrote that Fairy Queen. So these are basically some of the important masterpieces or the classic works of English literature, and they are all from the Renaissance era. So you can always mention, obviously the most important thing that you might always remember, even if you forget everyone, you will remember the name of Shakespeare. So you can always write Shakespeare. And yes, the most important work is Paradise Lost. This you will have to remember. Paradise Lost is written by John Milton. We have the entire paragraph in your books about Shakespeare's work. You know about Shakespeare, you know about his works, so you can write everything about Shakespeare's work, though it will not be asked in detail, but you can simply write that he is regarded as the greatest English writer till date, and all his dramas are considered to be classic piece of work. And he is also called as the Bard of Avon. He wrote somewhere around 38 plays. That is more information than required. You don't have to require any more than that. How many sonnets he has written, what long poem, short poem, nothing required. But if you want to, for your general idea, you can remember it, because sometimes you might tend to forget certain things that you have prepared, and these tidbits might be the things that you remember. So you can obviously use them whenever you are describing or writing an answer regarding description of Shakespeare or anything asked in short question type answers. Remember the names of most of his plays that you have done: A Midnight Summer's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It, Twelfth Night. And then there are many of the tragedies. The important tragedies are Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, and Macbeth. And obviously you have your own play, The Merchant of Venice, that you cannot forget ever. Lastly, we move on to the last field on which we see the impact of Renaissance, and that is science. Now, science marked the beginning of Renaissance marked the beginning of the modern era of science. It was earlier, it was held that all views, even on science, are to be supported by the authority of the scriptures. Scripture means obviously the religious text, the Bible, because church was controlling it. They did not want any controversy where science is against the religion. So that has to be that whatever the facts are given by science has to be approved and should go in coordination with the scripture. However, the scientists of this period believed that all views and science should be based on the observation and experimentation. Proper experiments have to be done, observation have to be done. Then whatever the results come, that has to be declared and accepted by all, whether it abides with the religion or not, whether it contradicts. It has to be taken that way if it proves in the experiment. Here, among these, the most important famous scientist of this era was Nicholas Copernicus. And Nicholas Copernicus was a mathematician and astronomer who formulated a model of the universe. And in that particular model, he placed sun rather than the earth in the center of the universe. Till then, it was believed by the religion that earth is created by God and that is the center of the universe. But he placed that it is not earth but the sun which is the center of the universe. The publication of this model in his book, De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, that is on the revolutions of the celestial spheres, just before his death in 1543, is regarded as a major event in the history of science, because this was the one which triggered the Copernicus revolution, because scientists were in favor and the theologians, those who are in favor of religion, they were totally on the contrary, they were totally against it. They were on the other end. So Copernicus based his heliocentric theory on the following things. These were the main reasons why he made sun as the center of the universe and earth and everything moving around him. That is, first he said there is no one center of all celestial circles or spheres. That means there is no particular center. Everything is revolving around something or the other. The center of the earth is not the center of the universe, but only of gravity and of lunar sphere. So that means even the earth is not a center of the universe. The center part of the universe of earth is just a gravity which is pulling all of us towards the earth. All the spheres revolve around the sun, all the stars, all the planets that they saw at that time they had discovered. He considered that all of them are revolving around the sun. It is not only earth, but there are other such things and they all are revolving around the sun, and that forms our universe. Remember, that time universe is basically the term used for solar system. The earth has more than one motion, turning on its axis and moving in a spherical orbit around the sun. So it is not only that the earth is moving around the sun, the earth is also moving around itself or rotating on its own, on its axis, which is an imaginary line. So it was believed till then that they did not have this idea of day and night and the seasons, but then he gave this idea that the two movements are there visible, the rotation and the revolution. Later on, German scientist John Kepler proved that the earth and other planets move round the sun, and it was not a circle but an elliptical orbit. That means they are not totally in a round circle roaming around the sun, but they are in a oval shape, a little elongated circle in which that particular way the planets move around the sun. Italian scientist Galileo invented the telescope, and Sir Isaac Newton discovered the law of gravitation. Remember, Copernicus had earlier given some thing about gravity, but what is gravity, how it was working, that was proved by Isaac Newton much later when he started doing his particular research, and obviously we know because of the dropping of the apple he came to know about this. That's a different issue, but that is how gravity and gravitational laws came into being. Great discoveries were made in the field of medical sciences also. Vesalius wrote a treatise on anatomy, and then William Harvey, an English physician, discovered the circulation of blood. Later onwards, we can say Paracelsus proved a close connection between medicine and chemistry, how chemical reactions and that through those salts and everything medication can be done. That is modern days allopathic. Later on was cordus, prepared either from ether from alcohol and sulfuric acid. Helmont discovered carbon dioxide. So these are the various names of the scientists who proved or who found or discovered various things, and they had proper scientific observations and experimentations proving their discoveries, and that is how they were totally accepted by the modern thinkers or the Renaissance thinkers, and that is how Renaissance was working in the society. Nobody could deny it, defy it. Why? Because it was properly backed with reasoning, observation, results. Everything was proved in a proper manner. Anybody who raised a question could be shown the entire experiment, and they could not argue on that any further. So that is how this particular modern thinking gave people an idea that things have to be understood, they have to be observed, and then a reason or a particular conclusion has to be drawn, not just by thinking about whatever the thing you can understand through your knowledge of religion or other thing. It should not be that ways, and this made way for people to have a spirit of inquiry and a modern thinking. Even Arabs gave algebra and numerals to the Western. Modern geometry was made systematic by Desargues. Stephen advocated decimal system, weights, and you can say measures. So these are the various you can say impact and new ways of understanding things that came into being even in mathematics, science, reasons, logics. All these things were understood in a better way just because there was a spirit of inquiry, and that was all thanks to Renaissance. So with this we come to the ending part of the chapter. We are just left with one topic, and that is consequences of the Renaissance. So positively, in the next video we'll be finishing off this chapter along with the question answers. So till then, go through these videos, read, and obviously try to understand them through your chapter, also through your own reading, but you can go through these videos every now and then, again and again, so that you understand the concept more clearly. And then we will try to finish this chapter and move on to the next chapter. So with this we come to the end of the module. Hope you'll understand it. You can always ask me any queries if you ever have any queries regarding this. So with this we end this video.